Sometimes we refer to planning your first company retreat, and I just think whether you're planning your first retreat or your 10th retreat, it just involves several key steps to ensure its success and meet the objectives. So whether it's team building or strategic planning, I think there are just some steps that a person should go through when they're planning that retreat. I would suggest the first step would be to define the objectives of the retreat. You need to identify what those main goals are. So they could include team building, as I mentioned earlier, strategic planning, training. You just want to make sure that your objectives are clear. And once you have that in place, then I think what's critical next is budgeting, because you really need to determine the budget early on, because that's going to influence many decisions of the retreat. It's going to affect the location. It's going to affect the activities, the amenities. So it's very important that you take into consideration travel costs, accommodations, meals. You may have to hire special speakers or even facilitators. Budgeting is critical to the process and critical to do it early on. You need to select a location, and that may not necessarily mean the venue. It just means maybe we want to do it in San Diego, or maybe we know we want to do it in Blacksburg, or that sort of thing. And you have to think, does it align with your objectives to be in San Diego? What's the proximity to your office? Do you want to reduce travel time? Does that matter? The availability of facilities like meeting rooms. So you have to look and see what's available in the area, as well as the accommodations. I think once you've defined your objectives, have a budget somewhat in place, and you select your location, now I think it's important you've got to hone in on some dates. Is it a set of dates that particular retreat has to take place on the same dates every year? Or are you going to be able to select dates that work for the majority of the attendees? You may have to just put out some feelers and say, here's what we're looking at. Does this work for the majority? You need to consider busy periods for your industry. Was it a good time to have your sales team away from the office? You also have to keep in mind major holidays. You probably want to avoid those. So it's just all about selecting dates so your employees can arrange their schedules accordingly. I would suggest would be arranging logistics. You've got to organize all logistical details in advance, right? So you've got to reserve your travel and transportation. Does that mean airline or flights? Does that mean buses? Does that mean car rentals? Got to get those things in order. And now it's time to think about, okay, what's the venue? And get that reserved. Get your meeting agenda reserved, your food and beverage activities in place, and your accommodations in place. So then I think you've got it all in place. You're ready to go. Now it's time to communicate back with the team, provide that detailed information well in advance. So you want to always include date, location, travel and accommodation details, just anything that you think they're going to need so they're well prepared. And then if it's an event that there are planned activities, it could be anything from a scavenger hunt to, let me tell you something fun. This was the first time for me. Last week I attended a conference myself, and so one of the team building activities was building sandcastles on the beach. Now that was pretty sweet. So it might be building sandcastles on the beach. It was just fun. They paired you up with folks that you didn't necessarily know that well, so it was a lot of networking opportunity. So it's a lot of fun. And there's lots of recreational activities depending on the area of the country you're meeting in. In our area in particular, hiking and kayaking and tubing are fabulous activities. So those are my thoughts about planning a retreat. I think the first step, once you've been given that responsibility, then you need to meet with the powers that be, have them define the objectives of the retreat, of the meeting. I really do. I think that's key, because once that's defined, it will help you to identify and move forward. I think budget is important. And you can't budget 100%. If it's a repeat retreat, you know what you've spent in the past. If it's not, then your boss may very well know exactly what to tell you for a budget number. And so now you've got that in place. Now select the location.